Hello, I'm Evelyn Ross. My dad called me inutile, that's useless in French, right in front of our clients, thinking I wouldn't understand a word. But I did. Every single word cut deeper than he knew. My family worked hard to erase me from the company legacy, rewriting my work, silencing my voice. They even made up stories to keep me out of meetings I led, pretending I was invisible. But what happens when the useless daughter refuses to stay silent? This isn't just a family feud. It's a fight for identity, for truth, and for the right to finally be seen. What happens when the shadows you live in become the spotlight you command? Stay with me. This story isn't over yet. I stepped into the glass-walled conference room in downtown Chicago at exactly 9:03 a.m., clipboard in hand, and confidence tucked under my tailored blazer. The morning light reflected off the polished concrete floor, making everything feel sharper than usual. I was fully prepared. Client documents lined up like a well-executed symphony. I believed my father Arthur would notice, but I already knew he wouldn't. I'd been working for this French corporate account since Q1, tirelessly coordinating legal agreements, translating notes, crafting presentation visuals. Today, my younger sister Astria, fresh out of a top PR program, was leading. She wore a pristine suit and a practiced smile. The clients, 3 suited French executives, filed in quietly from the lobby. I handed out neatly stacked folders labeled with project milestones. When I looked up, Astria was already giving the opening line in flawless French, and the clients nodded, impressed. My pulse pulsed at a steady hum. I stayed silent, observing every gesture, every glimmer of approval. The room felt tight, like it was holding its breath. My father, leaning casually against the corner of the table, glanced at me. He caught my eye, offered a small nod, like a dismissive parent signaling an obedient child. I swallowed a surge of bitterness. Then came the moment I'd feared. As I handed the last folder to a client, my father interjected in French, Elle est inutile, mais elle est bonne pour les copies. The translation slipped past his lips, as though he spat a casual insult. She's useless, but good for making copies. A polite chuckle rippled from the table. But in that polished boardroom, it felt like thunder inside me. My hand froze mid-present. I understood every word. I understood the humiliation. I was a daughter of 2 cultures, fluent in French, because of my mother's rich accent, memories from Paris. My throat tightened. A memory flickered of my mom whispering hope in my ear. Tu n'es jamais inutile. Tu es une étoile. You are never useless. You are a star. Let the clients laugh. Let my father pretend I couldn't understand. I would not dignify it with a response. I swallowed the hurt into the hollow of my chest and nodded. Professionalism wasn't weakness. I closed the folder, turned to face the clients again, and continued to walk them through the presentation timeline, carefully masking the storm behind my calm facade. Across the table, I caught one client's eye. He gave me a subtle acknowledgement. He saw. I felt the weight of recognition. My sister smiled smugly beside me, basking in attention. My father looked satisfied. In his world, this was a display of control. But I heard the crack in his tone. By the time I stepped out of the room, cool air hit my face. I paced the corridor until quiet hush returned. I pulled out my phone, found an old voice message from my mother. My thumb hovered over play. My heart braced. Tu n'es jamais inutile. Tu es une étoile. Mom's voice, soft, unwavering. My body shook, but only from a gathering of energy, certainty rising within me. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaled deep. No tears, just a sharp clarity. I tucked the phone away. This wasn't just another insult rolling off an entitled man's tongue. It was a bell signaling a movement in me, a shift. I would prove him wrong, but on my terms. My mind began ticking. Gather proof, reclaim credit, expose truth. I squared my shoulders, stepped into the elevator. Doors whooshed shut. Paris and Chicago seemed walls apart, but the memory of my mother's faith bridged them both. I walked out into the lobby, head high, with one goal. I would not stay invisible. When the elevator doors opened onto my floor, I felt the air shift. It was heavier, more deliberate. I walked toward my shared office corner, an open-plan workspace with frosted dividers and a faint hum of keyboards at midday. My assistant, Mark, ducked his head in when I passed by. He'd seen the look on my face. I acknowledged him with a brief nod, not ready to speak, still reeling from what had just happened. I slid into my chair and stared at my inbox. On top sat a meeting invite. Legacy briefing, core family assets. My name was nowhere to be found. I double-checked every list, attendee list, agenda, nothing. It was like someone closed a door without a sound. My silence from that morning still reverberated, but now it felt louder than any retort I could have made. I exhaled, scanning the email for clues. No justification, no apology, just a decision made. Without me. For so long, I'd believed that silent competence would win respect. But it didn't. My competence was invisible. The corner of my screen flashed a meeting already underway. I clicked on it and minimized the window, the live video showing my father standing at a podium in the executive conference room, streamed company-wide. I kept it in the background, like a wounded animal refusing to look. "You occasionally hear talk of future-proofing," Arthur began, voice smooth, rehearsed. "To stay relevant, we need new leadership. Today, I'm proud to introduce Astria as creative lead for the next generation." My breath caught. I leaned in. He was smiling, shining like he'd won something. The screen flashed to Astria, radiant and poised. Behind her was a branded slide with her name in bold. His words echoed, "Her modern vision and brand instincts will guide us forward." And just like that, my work, my pitch for the Paris expansion, my voice, was erased. I clenched both fists under my desk. Those campaign ideas, my digital strategy, my analysis, they were being described as her brilliance. I felt the sting not just of betrayal, but of erasure. Later, I drifted toward the staff cafeteria, letting a half-empty cup of coffee go cold. Astria spotted me and sauntered over, holding her own lattes like trophies. "Big sis," she said with efforted warmth. "You know, you were always more classic. Dad needs someone with sparkle now." Classic. Useless. Copies. My chest tightened so hard I thought I couldn't breathe. She placed her hand on my shoulder, as if consoling. The movement made my skin crawl. I laughed, low and steady. "Yeah? Well, that Paris pitch you just got credit for. It was mine last quarter." Her brow arched. "Oh, I thought that was your assistant's work." She paused. "Cute story." I stared. A junior designer hovering nearby looked at me uncertainly. He whispered, "Weren't you the one who pitched that?" The words hung in the air, an echo. I paused and then said evenly, "Apparently, I was just taking notes." The designer backed away. Astria smiled again, but it wasn't warm. It was predatory. She left, her footsteps echoing through the cafeteria. I watched her go, feeling the space contract around me. I realized this wasn't just about credit. It was a calculated takeover. By the time I returned to my desk, I felt hollow and sharper. I opened my digital folder, Family Pitch 2023, and hesitated. The cursor hovered. Then I deleted it, not in anger, but in purpose. Then a blank document popped up. In the file name bar, I typed, "Rebuild, not for them, not for Astria, not for my father, for me." My fingertips tapped the first sentence before I even realized it. They think I'm dispensable. They're about to find out how wrong they are. My heart hammered. Not out of fear, but resolve. Abruptly, Mark peeked in. "You okay?" I looked up and met his eyes. "This is the beginning," I said. He blinked, surprised, but nodded. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the cafeteria noise, and dove into work. I sketched out an outline, compile all my past proposals, collect emails where I led initiatives, prepare to show them concrete proof. Keep quiet, gather strength, then strike. Later that day, I slipped into the empty conference room. It was late afternoon. Sunlight painted the long table. I drafted bullet points. Paris Vision Origination, Q1 strategy documents, email threads showing leadership direction, draft social media plans under Evelyn Hayes's name. My brain moved faster than ever, fueled by the morning's insult. When I finally left the room, dusk sliding onto the windows, I paused and looked back. That empty space now held potential. Tonight, I would chase down my attorney friend, Michaela. Tomorrow, I'd dig through old servers. But first, I needed rest. I walked past the front desk, sliding out of the office into crisp Chicago evening. I took a deep breath. The world didn't yet know the forces I was marshaling, but they would. The city was still dark when I tapped the power button on my laptop. A pale glow lit my living room, and I felt acutely aware of the silence around me. No chatter from Mark, no footfall in the corridor. Just me, alone with a fresh sense of purpose. I opened the company's internal drive and began scrolling through the campaign folder I'd worked on so hard. Her name, Astria, was stamped across the top of every document. I stopped at one pitch deck. Identical visuals, identical slide structure, identical captions. The metadata showed it was originally mine, but overwritten 2 days ago. My hands shook, and I pressed Save As, then transferred a complete copy into an encrypted folder titled Exhibit A, Ownership. I leaned back, my breath shallow. Shock and betrayal churned. But there was also clarity. This wasn't incidental. It was a theft. I shut the lid on my laptop and noticed the clock. 6:45 a.m. I needed facts. I dressed quickly, skipping coffee, and made my way to the office. The cold morning air hit me harder than before, but every inhale steadied me. Inside, I bypassed the receptionist and headed straight to Arthur's office. It was later than usual, late morning, but he was already there, leaning over his mahogany desk. He looked up, expression cool. "I'd like my name restored on the Paris deck," I said, voice even. I stood tall despite the tension brewing inside. He flicked through some papers. "Evelyn, you contributed, sure, but Astria executed it. You were assisting, not leading." His words hit like ice. "I led the entire strategy," I countered. "Every concept, every page, I drafted it." He adjusted his tie, eyes distant. "You were just helping," he said lightly. "It's business." My jaw tightened. This was more than credit. This was erasing me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I closed my laptop, chest tight, and nodded. Understood. I left before there was more to say. His office door closed behind me like a sentence. Outside, a clerk passed by, her recognition fleeting but sympathetic. I didn't let it register. Instead, I walked to a quiet park bench across the street, autumn wind rustling around me. I retrieved a leather notebook from my bag and wrote, "Truth doesn't need credit, but betrayal reveals legacy games." The pen wanted to scratch through the words, but I let it glide. I thought of my mother, her humor, her warmth, how she always reminded me I had talent. And for the first time, I understood. I'd spent my life being help, never the one writing the story. Always the ghost. I closed the notebook and stood, eyes on the skyscrapers behind the glass facades. Another jogger circled the path, oblivious. It reminded me, life goes on. I would do more than cling to what was taken. I'd take control. Back in my car, I drafted an encrypted email to myself with the campaign files intact. Subject: Exhibit A, Ownership. I added a few lines in the body. This is proof, not just for them, for me. Driving home at dusk, the skyline shimmered as streetlights came on. My mind reeled with plans. Reach out to Michaela tomorrow. Press through legal channels. Spotlight the truth. But right now, there was something I had to accept. The game had changed. They thought I'd stay silent. They thought I'd let them rewrite my story. Game on. When I stepped into the near-empty office that late evening, the soft hum of fluorescent lights greeted me. My heels clicked as I walked past colleagues packing up for the day. I carried a worn leather folder, the one containing Exhibit A, pressed close to my chest. Every echo down that corridor felt like affirmation. I was no longer staying invisible. I slid into my cubicle, heart steady. Around me, screens glowed with idle screensavers. I opened our CRM platform and navigated to the finalized contracts section. Fingers trembling slightly, I searched for my name. It didn't appear, not once. Every major campaign I'd spearheaded, Paris launch, Q2 social rollout, strategic rebranding, listed Astria or the nebulous brand vision team. Not a single mention of me as project lead. I scrolled through email chains, the back and forth planning, the approvals, the midnight revisions. My name was there, drafting, guiding, leading, but in the official record, invisible. I closed the tab and rubbed my temples. A hollowness spread through me. Betrayal turned worst when it became systemic. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate erasure. Later that week, I found myself in a luxury hotel's private dining suite, an elegant setting for a key client dinner. The room had soft amber lighting, the table set with polished silver, walls draped in cream fabric. I wore a dark sheath dress, heels carefully chosen to make me feel poised, not loud. Arthur sat at the head, Astria to his right. Across from us, French and U.S. stakeholders chatted quietly. When introductions began, Arthur nodded toward Astria. Astria Hayes, the mind behind this campaign. Soft applause followed. My pulse sped up. I spoke next, preparing to outline deliverables. I could feel the clients watching, waiting. Then Arthur cut in. And Evelyn, logistical support. The words landed. Cold dismissal. A knot tightened in my throat. I took a breath and began. I spoke in French when a French client asked a technical question, perfectly fluent. But Arthur interrupted, directing his gaze toward Astria. She'll handle that. The clients exchanged glances, puzzled. One of them subtly tilted his head, clearly expecting me to continue. But I didn't. I held back. Silence became my answer. Back in the hallway, minutes later, I cornered Arthur. Was that a mission calculated or just habit? I asked evenly. He brushed past me, cool as ever. Don't make this about you. Clients demand clarity. Clarity or control? I pressed. He didn't stop. He didn't even look back. My elbow brushed the wall, solid and unyielding beneath my fingertips. I inhaled slowly, steadying the flush in my cheeks. Dad had turned a vulnerable matter into spectacle and stripped me down in front of clients. It wasn't a mistake. It was power play. As I walked back into the suite, I caught my reflection in a tall mirror near the entry. Half of my face was shadowed. The other half caught the warm glow of the chandelier. I paused, studying that division. Invisible here, but irrevocably present elsewhere. In a quiet voice, I whispered, "If they won't see me, I'll make sure they can't ignore me." I gathered the company pad and pen off the table and slipped out, leaving murmurs behind. I passed the head waiter collecting cutlery, bowed politely, and left with my mind racing. That night, I didn't go home. I returned to the office and stood before the copier. I fed in copies of contracts, email threads, pitch decks, every proof of authorship, pages Word stacked, each one a testament. By 10 p.m., the printer was silent, paper piled high. Exhibit A was no longer just digital. It was physical, tangible. Freezing air seeped in through the vents. I exhaled, hand hovering over the stack. This was more than vindication. It was declaration. I knew tomorrow would bring confrontation, disruption. But tonight, I had concrete ground underneath my feet. I left the office after midnight, stepping into the empty parking garage. The echo of my heels sounded loud in the silence. Exhibit A rested in my bag. And though the game had changed before, tonight it shifted irrevocably. Tomorrow would be different. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the hum of the city pressing through my windows, and the weight of Exhibit A stacked neatly on my kitchen table. My phone lit up with the 6:30 alarm, but I'd been awake long before that. By 8 a.m., I stood at the base of the office tower, coffee in hand, coat buttoned to my collarbone. It was brisk, typical Chicago spring chill, but I didn't feel it. I felt sharpened. I entered the building, badge scanned, and stepped into the elevator just as Astria rushed in behind me. She barely acknowledged me as she fixed her silk scarf in the mirrored walls. Her reflection met mine with that usual glint, mischief wrapped in entitlement. Then, casually, she said in French, Elle pense encore qu'elle compte ici. C'est adorable. She still thinks she matters here. That's cute. I let the silence hold for a moment. I didn't blink, didn't shift. Then, as the elevator chimed and she moved to step out, I replied in French, soft but precise. Only cowards whisper when they're unsure who's listening. She froze. Just a second. But I saw it, the twitch in her jaw. Then she left, not looking back. I stepped out a floor later, heading toward the boardroom for that morning's prep. As I passed through the hallway, I caught a hushed conversation near the glass divider. She's smart, Callista was saying to one of the junior designers. But she's just a shadow. Astria always outshines her. They didn't see me, or maybe they didn't care. I paused for only a breath, then kept walking. I didn't confront them. I didn't flinch. I just walked straight into the boardroom and took the lead chair, Arthur's usual spot. One of the senior associates raised an eyebrow. No one said anything. I opened my laptop, connected to the monitor, and pulled up the digital campaign dashboard. Metrics, engagement rates, target reach, all charts with my fingerprints all over them. Let's begin, I said, voice calm, confident. Heads turned. The room settled. I outlined the strategy, referencing shifts in consumer behavior, tying our creative to analytics that only I had tracked. The presentation was precise, compelling, no theatrics, just facts, results, truth. Midway through, the door opened. Astria entered, half laughing with her phone in hand, until she saw me standing there. Her smile faltered. You're welcome to join, I said, still looking at the screen. But today, I speak first. She stood at the doorway for a second, then took a chair near the back. Didn't interrupt once. When the presentation ended, there was a pause. The kind that only happens when expectations get upended. A few staff clapped softly. I didn't need more. As I gathered my things, Arthur walked by, briefcase in hand, jaw clenched. He stopped just long enough to say, "Don't get too comfortable." I met his gaze and replied, steady, "That's the point. I'm done being comfortable in silence." I left the boardroom and walked through the corridors with a slow, deliberate pace. Faces turned. No one dared speak. Back at my desk, I didn't sit. I pulled open the bottom drawer and lifted out the key to my personal cabinet, a small, nondescript file cabinet I'd kept mostly empty. Until now. That night, instead of going straight home, I stayed. The cleaning crew moved around me like I wasn't there, just another shadow on the floor. But I wasn't a shadow, not anymore. I began filing physical copies, Exhibit A, emails printed in sequence, strategy notes, handwritten edits, meeting memos I'd signed, each labeled, each protected. I was building something separate now, a record, a vault, a legacy. If they thought this was about a title, a meeting, or a campaign, they still didn't understand. This wasn't revenge, this was reclamation. The following morning, I returned to my apartment just before sunrise. The sky outside my window bled from indigo to pale gray. I stood at my desk, not even taking off my coat, and opened the encrypted folder I had created the night before. I added the new files, the physical, the digital, the undeniable. Then I renamed the folder, Contingency Files. I clicked save. My laptop hummed softly, like it understood the shift that had taken root inside me. I took out a small box I'd picked up online, still in its packaging, and unwrapped the sleek pen tucked inside. It looked ordinary, but when I clicked it, a tiny red dot blinked. Audio, encrypted. Legal in Illinois. Discreet. Enough. They wanted silence. I'd give them playback. That afternoon, during an informal executive huddle, I slid the pen into the inner pocket of my blazer. No one noticed. Not Arthur, who stood near the window, pretending to reflect on quarterly trends. Not Astria, who sat back in her chair with her shoes half off, swirling her tea like royalty. Restructuring will help us streamline, Arthur said, his tone flat, unreadable. We've got too many overlapping voices, Astria added with a grin. It's time to cut the fat, especially in international campaigns. We need sparkle, not spreadsheets. The room chuckled. I nodded, kept my hands folded in my lap. The pen blinked once. Later that night, back in my apartment, I reviewed the audio. Every word, every tone, labeled and backed up. 2 days later, minutes before the global Zoom meeting for Project Sierra, the campaign I had conceived, pitched, and nurtured, I received a Slack ping from HR. Simple, efficient, cold. Due to realignment, you will not be presenting today. Astria will lead. An email followed. Subject: Project Sierra, Leadership Shift. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I closed the window without responding, left the Zoom before it began. My hand hovered over the trackpad, trembling slightly, but not from fear, from decision. I tapped twice on the encrypted folder. Then I walked to the kitchen, made tea, sat down, and opened the recorder. One clip stood out. I played it. Arthur's voice, clipped and low. She can't lead globally. She's not marketable enough. The words sliced, but I didn't flinch. I pressed pause. Let the silence settle around me. Then I whispered aloud, to no one in particular, "Neither are your secrets." That night, I stayed up reviewing campaign files, tracing metadata trails, organizing emails, stacking screenshots into a chronological storm. Each document was a match, each clip a fuse. I wasn't rushing anymore. I wasn't shouting. I was collecting the truth, piece by deliberate piece. When I finally crawled into bed, the sky outside had gone dark again. My last thought before drifting into a restless sleep wasn't of vengeance or hurt. It was clarity. They had built an empire on erasure. But I had kept every receipt. By Monday, the air was crisp, sharper than it should have been for late April. I arrived at the office before the sun had fully risen, the world still cloaked in that pre-dawn blue. My steps echoed across the marble lobby, familiar but heavier, as if each one carried something irreversible. I took the elevator up alone. As the doors closed and the floor numbers blinked past, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. There I was, eyes lined with sleepless hours, jaw set firm, not a hair out of place, not a thought out of order. Then, like a snapped rubber band, the flashback came. That dinner in Paris, 2 years ago. A room full of clients. Laughter, wine. And Arthur leaned back with his usual faux charm, turning to one of the French executives with a chuckle and tossing his hand toward me as if I were invisible. "Inutile," he said. "Just a presence. Decorative." The man laughed awkwardly, unsure if it was a joke. But Arthur smiled, raised his glass, and never looked at me again that night. Back in the elevator, the word looped inside my skull. Inutile, 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 until I leaned forward, palms flat against the mirror, and said clearly to my own reflection, I was never useless. I was just misused. The next few days blurred through meetings, forced smiles, and silence packed like snow beneath boots. By Friday, I hadn't confronted Arthur. I hadn't exposed Astria, but the tremors underneath their empire had begun. At noon, I found myself alone in the break room, nursing a bitter coffee that tasted more like burnt memory than caffeine. Seraphine walked in quietly, poured herself a decaf, and sat across from me without asking. She didn't speak right away, just watched me. Finally, she leaned forward and said softly, Why do you let them treat you like this? I blinked, not out of confusion, but because I'd never heard anyone here call it what it was. I answered without pause. Because I thought they were family. Turns out they're just shareholders. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small silver flash drive, slid it across the table. Check the media relations folder, she said. You'll want to see what was sent to Forbes last week. I looked at her, heart hitching a beat. Why are you doing this? She shrugged. Because silence only helps the wrong people win. That Sunday night, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor with my laptop open and the flash drive plugged in. The files were clean, too clean. Press releases tailored to rewrite reality. Articles doctored by Astria's team, reshaping the narrative to place her at the center of campaigns I'd built from the ground up. My name didn't appear once. Even the quote I'd given at last quarter's PR launch was attributed to a senior consultant. I closed my eyes, then reached for a yellow legal pad. On the first page, I drew a tree. The trunk I labeled Truth. Its roots, emails, designs, recordings. Each branch carried the name of a campaign. Lumiere, Cascade, Vita Reach. Each leaf, one moment they'd tried to erase. Then I circled the tree and wrote, War isn't always declared. Sometimes it's published. Before I shut the laptop, I placed the flash drive into a padded envelope. I wrote in block letters across the front, in case of silence. Then I sealed it, pressed the edges tight, and placed it inside my office tote. I picked up my phone and texted Seraphine. Next round's on me, but it won't be coffee. The padded door clicks shut behind me, and I place the envelope, in case of silence, onto the desk with deliberate care. Light filters through the blinds, dust motes drifting like thoughts in my apartment-turned-war room. My heart pulses with a steady resolve. Tonight, I begin rewriting the narrative. I clear stacks of documents and photo prints across the table. The clock reads 2 a.m., but my mind races with every campaign I led. I open folders labeled Lumiere, Cascade, Vita Reach, my fingerprints stamped on every page, every pixel, every strategy outline. I pull up the first draft of the Lumiere pitch from my hard drive. There it is. My original opening line, my mood board details, invention of the hashtag that went viral. I highlight sections Astria claimed as hers in internal presentations. I recreate my folders. Proof set A, untouched. Proof set B, chain of emails. Proof set C, original video scripts. I label each margin in red ink. Ownership verified. It's peaceful, almost clinical, as I work through file after file, marking my trail. Evidence becomes architecture, memory becomes structure. I flash back to our early brainstorming sessions at the loft near Lincoln Park, sipping strong coffee late into winter nights, my excitement naive but glorious. Those nights birthed Vita Reach, my concept to tie wellness brands to heartwarming family stories. That original pitch deck sits here with my name still intact. Tonight, I make sure it stays that way. By dawn, I've recreated every campaign's original backbone. Daylight filters into my living room, and I lean back, shoulders heavy with accomplishment. The small recording pen Seraphine helped me plant has 40 hours of incriminating audio. The printouts weigh like iron in my hands. They thought they could bury me. Now I've resurrected everything. Later that Sunday at lunch, a ping on my phone from Seraphine. Check the creative post, page 2. My finger trembles as I open the link. There it is on my screen. Meet Astria, the young visionary redefining legacy brands. The headline screams betrayal. Below, a glossy photo of Astria gazing into the camera, while Arthur's quote rings out, "She's the reason we're global now." Not a single acknowledgement of the teams behind those campaigns, much less me. A sting, but nothing I hadn't anticipated. I close the article, jaw clenched. Betrayal has a taste. Bitter steel. But I lift my phone instead of succumbing. I start uploading my folders to a secure Dropbox folder marked for investors, authorship evidence. Then I draft an email. Subject, clarification, campaign authorship, evidence attached. Recipient, Global Investor Network. My cursor hovers over Send. I do not press it, not yet. Tension coils around me like a wire waiting to be tripped. My breath steadies. Evening comes. I stand before the full-length mirror in my bedroom, red cosmetics in hand. Face tired, but eyes fierce. Carefully, I write across the glass. They made the monster, now they'll meet her. Seeing that phrase across the reflection shifts me further. No longer Evelyn the helper, but Evelyn the reckoner. No longer silent. Tomorrow is Monday. My wardrobe chosen. A tailored cream blazer, black slacks. Visible, professional. I place the sealed session of truth in my tote, slink the lipstick-hidden pen into my pocket, and hold the phone with the untouched email ready. In the dark of my hallway bedroom, I glance back at the mirror one last time. Evelyn meets Evelyn. The room hums with expectation. The next morning, the boardroom will be her battlefield. The mirror may have cracked, but I walk from its shards whole. The padded door clicks shut behind me, sealing Sunday night's reckoning. Morning tiptoes into the city, quiet, purposeful. I lift my tote, containing the email draft and flash drive, then step into my car. The office tower reflects dawn in its glass, but I feel like I'm walking into a trial. Scene 1. The fracture at the meeting, Monday, 9 a.m. The boardroom is half filled, international faces in front of laptops. A video call with European partners flickers onto the screen. Monsieur Delacour appears, clean suit, polite smile. Arthur starts with pleasantries, then dives into campaign metrics. Astria clicks through slides, nice visuals, smooth delivery. No mention of me. Then Delacour leans forward on screen and asks in French, "Et la dame aux idées? Elle n'est plus là? And the lady with the ideas, is she no longer with you?" Silence. Arthur's face tightens. He stammers something about restructuring. Astria fumbles in English, shifting focus. I am on mute, frozen, watching a crack deepen. I snap a screenshot. That question is a fracture. Proof the world noticed. That's all I need. Scene 2. The erased event, later. Evening at the company auditorium. It's packed. Investors, media, staff. Callista strides on stage under warm lights, microphone in hand. "Tonight, we celebrate Astria's solo brilliance," she says, voice soaring. Behind her, the campaign imagery I created, taglines, visuals, rotate on a giant screen. The crowd applauds. I sit at the back, nearly invisible. A reporter edges toward Arthur afterward. "What about Evelyn?" they ask. He smiles thinly. "Supportive, but no creative direction. Not a lie, but not the full truth." My chest tightens, but I breathe steady. Scene 3. Quiet retaliation begins. I drive home as night falls. My apartment is still, except for the glow of the city. Seraphine calls. "They're curious," she says. "We didn't offer comment, but the media is asking." I say, "Let them wonder for one more day." I upload the Genesis deck, original creation timeline, Evelyn Ross, from the flash drive. It's small, but explosive. I email it to a few industry insiders, one lead investor, a prominent columnist, a veteran journalist. I write, "Timeline verification. I led these campaigns. Open for clarification." Then, I close the lid. I don't need to watch the notifications light up. Ending cliffhanger, that night, media feeds ping. A buzz. Multiple sources claim credit misrepresentation. I glance at my screen. Then I close it and let the quiet fill me. My voice in my head. Next time, I won't need a seat. I'll own the stage. I step into Friday morning with intent. This time, I'm the one breaking the silence. My crimson blazer feels like armor as I walk the quiet hallway before dawn, slipping into my apartment office to draft an email. Subject: Original intellectual property, attached for transparency. I attach the full campaign files, drafts, mood boards, email timestamps, everything. No flourish, no grandstanding, only a straight presentation of facts. I hit send, and the click echoes louder in my chest than any applause. I take a deep breath, tuck the evidence away, and drive to the office, letting daylight fill the uncertainty. Arriving at work, I sense the shift. The elevator ride is hushed. People's eyes flick to the red. I share a glance with Seraphine in the lobby. Her steady nod confirms it's happening. Upstairs in the boardroom, tablets charge and screens blink awake. A live call is scheduled with our French investors, including Monsieur Delacour. Arthur opens the meeting, ready to lead. Astria smiles at me over the table, but I hold my place. Half standing, a silent signal that today I move differently. The video screen fills with Delacour's polite greeting in French. Things seem the same, until he leans forward. "Before we proceed," he says in perfect French, "I must ask, who created the Genesis branding?" All eyes swivel. Arthur falters, his eyebrows hiking. Astria flushes. The pause stretches. I lower my shoulders, unmute myself, and answer in the same language. "C'était moi. J'ai construit chaque mot, chaque image." It lands like a gavel. The confidence in my voice isn't brash. It's measured, undeniable. In that pause, I feel the boardroom shift. Their posture straightens, formulas rewriting. Arthur lifts his hand. I catch the moment before he speaks, his face unsettled, his script broken. Seraphine leans toward him, whispering, "You didn't know she lived in Paris?" The boardroom hums, my presence now undeniable. I meet Delacour's gaze with calm certainty. While the team was highlighting surface appeal, I was studying visual linguistics in Montmartre, blending technique with nuance. I didn't rely on titles, I epitomized them. No one interrupts, no applause. But I see the recalibration, the balance shifting. Astria's tightening smile, Arthur's slack jaw. Evidence. Later, the call ends with Delacour's final words, still echoing. "We look forward to working with you, Mademoiselle Ross." I close my folder, look around, then whisper, "Let's begin again. Honestly this time." Arthur glances at me as he exits. His look isn't anger. It's surprise, the kind that preludes realignment. The hallway feels different on my way out. Colleagues avoid eye contact, some offer hesitant smiles. It's a small stage, but it feels vast. The door to the conference room felt heavier than usual as I stepped inside. The room was sterile, neutral, no familiar decor to soften the sharp edges of corporate tension. Today wasn't about pleasantries. It was about facts, proof, justice. I placed the thick binder on the table before the assembled stakeholders, legal advisors, and of course, Arthur. Seraphine sat quietly beside me, her presence a silent pillar of support. I glanced around the room, noting the shifting expressions, curiosity, unease, impatience. "Proof of ownership," I began calmly, voice steady. "Concept drafts, email threads, time-stamped revisions, every piece documenting the journey from inception to execution. Everything." Hands reached for the binder, flipping pages, scanning documents. The air thickened with unspoken tension. Arthur's gaze flicked over the papers. His confident mask faltered. "This," he said, attempting to dismiss, "is nothing more than a family disagreement." Seraphine slid a sealed envelope across the table, a signed non-disclosure agreement, and an audio file with a time-stamped recording of Arthur's own words. I locked eyes with Arthur. "This isn't personal anymore. It's legal." The room went quiet, the weight of truth settling in like a slow tide. Outside, headlines erupted like wildfire. Ross scandal, misattribution allegations surface. Who really created Genesis? Emails from clients and investors flooded inboxes, messages placing partnerships on hold pending legal resolution. The house of cards trembled. Meanwhile, Arthur sat in his home office, the glow of his laptop casting shadows on a face etched with regret. A call from Astria blinked unanswered. She knew better than to disturb this fragile moment. He scrolled through online backlash, comments piling like stones on a sinking ship. His mind replayed my voice, steady and cold in his ear. I only appeared useless because you refused to see me. I walked out of the courthouse steps under a low sun, my shadow stretching long and proud behind me. The battle was won, not for him, but for myself. I didn't win to prove anything to him, I whispered into the cooling air. I won to stop proving anything to myself. The legal storm was over, but the road to healing had only just begun. Some wounds don't show in courtrooms. They live quietly beneath the skin. The morning light spilled softly through the tall windows of the Paris boardroom by the Seine, casting warm patterns on the polished wood table. It was an oddly serene setting for a moment that would change everything. Monsieur Delacour sat at the head of the table, flanked by two major investors whose reputations alone could sway markets and reshape futures. I sat opposite them, steady but alert, knowing this was the culmination of years of invisibility and whispered doubts. Delacour reached across and slid a thick contract toward me. His eyes held that rare mixture of respect and sincerity. Mademoiselle Ross, we insist you lead this project yourself, not them. One of the investors nodded, adding, We've heard the truth, and we trust the star, not the stagehand. The words settled around me like a cloak. Years of being sidelined, erased, and underestimated suddenly distilled into this simple, powerful validation. I responded in fluent French, my voice calm but proud. Merci beaucoup. C'est un honneur. Thank you very much. It is an honor. The gravity of that moment wasn't lost on me. It wasn't just about winning contracts or recognition. It was about reclaiming my own worth, my own voice. Later that day, back at the company headquarters, I sat across from Arthur in my office for what I knew would be our last conversation. I built your legacy, I told him evenly, but it cost mine. I'm going to build mine now. Arthur's usual smirk faltered. He was speechless. Seraphine watched quietly, her eyes reflecting respect, without a word spoken. I reached into my bag and placed a crisp, single-page resignation letter on his desk. The words typed plainly on the front page. I was only useless while I believed in him. The weight of those words hung in the air. This was no angry farewell. It was a quiet, powerful closure. I wasn't burning bridges. I was choosing a new path. Weeks later, in the calm of my new home office, sunlight streamed in over Parisian art and a few cherished photographs, including one of my mother and me. It was a reminder of the star I was always meant to be, and the legacy I was ready to write on my own terms. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote across the top. Chapter 1. Evelyn Ross Creative. I turned on the camera for my new vlog, a project born from both necessity and hope. If you've ever been called useless, I said softly, looking directly into the lens, know this. You only are if you decide to stay still. Move, speak, own your story. The camera pulled back as I began typing my first design brief for my consultancy. The morning light caught my face, a promise and a beginning. My father once called me useless. He didn't realize he was choosing the person I'd become.